My experience for African musicians in London, I think we're not hungry enough. Yeah, when I say hungry enough, hungry for success.
Google sells your music, but it doesn't pay you anything. Every time you see an ad and you go on a page because of some music and there's an ad there, are you earning from that?
To work with me, and it's the same thing really, for getting yourself out in the marketplace, for being radio ready, for being career ready. You need to know what you're doing. You need to be good. You need to have a story. Have a story about what you're doing. Have a story in your music, and have your story ready.
World music was created. I don't want to split heads here, but I've been a non-believer of the concept of world music. I thought, in a way, it was just there as a cultural penetration tool, if you want. People wanted to commodify music into a category that they will be able to market it. I remember when these terms were being thrown around. We, as Africans in London, I think the majority of people never really liked that term. We never really wanted African music to be associated with that. We really wanted to find a space to promote our own music with our own sensibilities of the music to the different crowds that come to consume it, if you want. Hello, Ray. Now, on that one, I'll fast forward again. As this thing was being commodified into world music, there were other groups that came, people that I was involved with, like the Bunda Boys, who refused to be categorized in this category, who decided to go on their own terms, on their own musical definitions. They wanted their music to be called Jit music, which is a form of music that was played in Zimbabwe. And they were steadfast on refusing it to be called world music. I tell you what, they actually succeeded. Because as a group, in that category, which they refused to be marketed under world music, Jit music became a concept. It became something. If you went into HMV, if you went into Virgin Records, they had their own category. They had sold more records as Jit music, not as world music. So it kind of proved us right. I mean, for most of us who did not agree with this term, that world music really is just a concept, just to market things, but in a way it does not advance African music per se as African music. You know, so we're still seeing this concept being used all the time. I mean, people like Walmart being the people who really propagate this kind of concept. I think space should be given. I mean, I'm fast forwarding it again, ways forward, how we can get to where we are now and how to promote our own music, how we want to be addressed. I think we should really address our music and our concepts of our music as how we live and define it by our own terms and sell it to the world as how we see it fit. I think this is a lesson to most record companies out there, that you need Africans to be involved, to partake, you know, in the marketing of this music. There's always these misconceptions of how Africans are not able to market their own things. And we can sell our own products. We make them, we consume them, we know how to sell them, given the chance. We might not have the economic means to push it forward, which at one point we also need our governments to support us, which is one thing governments in Africa don't see what we do as an industry. They don't look at it as something that is viable. I mean, look at the case of Jamaica. You know, it took Bob Marley to come here to record and popularize music of Jamaican origin outside of his country, for the government to realize there was a viable industry, to start building studios, to start taking the music seriously as a proper business concern. A lot of African governments today, they still do not take our music seriously. So again, this is, if you want another way of encouraging our music forward, is to encourage our governments, or force them if we can, you know, to take this industry quite seriously. There are lots of other areas we can look into in terms of the new technologies that are coming in. How do our audiences buy our music? With globalization, Africa has changed. There was a lot of piracy of music in Africa. People would release an album, it's pirated, the musicians themselves wouldn't make any money. But fast forwarding it again, now people can download the music and the money comes direct to you as an artist. You know, and I wonder how many of our artists there in Africa realize this, that there is now new ways of working, there's now new ways of selling music. It's no longer record companies that can go there in the forefront for you. You can do it yourself as an artist. You can make money yourself as an artist. So there's various ways. You know, in Zimbabwe, where I come from, there's been ways to try and counteract some of these things, that people have started pricing their CDs in a much more affordable way, that the ordinary people would be able to access CDs, buy CDs, and not buy overpriced CDs. I don't know, there's lots more to that, I just don't know where to start from. Yeah. But anyway, having had this privilege, which I've had, to work with so many artists from Africa, I'm sure the story is the same all over. I've had the privilege to work with some of the best artists to come from Africa, your Fela Kutis, Salif Keita's, Baba Ma, and also been instrumental in pushing and promoting our music here in the UK. You know, people like Angelique Kidjo, from a nobody to somebody. An interesting story here was when Angelique Kidjo came to town. I remember calling one of the big record companies and I said, look, I have someone quite interesting here. You know, I think you should sign her on. And I was told, no, we know what we're doing. And so again, here is another concept of an African who works in the industry, who's trying to bridge gaps, who understands the music, who is actually saying to a record company, look, we can work together. We have an idea of our music, and this music is good. It happened in the case of Salif Keita too. A friend of mine were to tell a record company, look, sign this guy on. And they were very reluctant. But when they did sign Salif Keita, it became this phenomenal thing. So we as Africans, we know our products. That's the point I'm trying to emphasize. We know it so well. I think might be going to split heads here a bit. For me, my experience for African musicians in London, I think we're not hungry enough. Yeah, when I say hungry enough, hungry for success. Like you said, you know, when we are in Africa, a lot of us were thinking, God, if I go to London, and if I go there, I'll play. They come here, they become lazy. For some unknown reason. I mean, some people have come here with bands, like you said yourself. Some have managed to settle here. And there are people you always expected to hear wonders, because they are now here, right here where the technologies are available. They have guitars, they can buy the latest guitars, they can use the latest equipment in the studios. But somehow, they just don't seem to progress. But what we're getting It's people who are coming from Africa with their bands intact, coming to play in London and doing wonders. Right now we have a band which is touring from Zimbabwe. I don't know if you all have heard it, called Mokumba. It's doing wonders. People are like, wow, this group is playing to thousands of people, packed houses. I'm sure Ray will testify. We've been to a few gigs to see them. And they've been number one on the world music charts, iTunes. You know, a success story. And everybody's saying, but why can't musicians in London do the same thing they're doing? There's always that difficulty now of moving. I think when you are here, how do you see yourself? How do you market yourself? How do you prepare yourself for this market? You know, are you ready for it? Or is it the way they are being packaged by other people when they are coming to this country, like in the world music concept, you know, as a novelty idea? This is a new thing I've discovered from Africa, when other people start to turn heads. So how do you yourself as a musician in London start to package yourself and sell yourself? There's been an interesting concept I observed from the, if you want, second generation of Africans who are born here. As I was saying, my niece, Shingi Shoniwa, the other ones coming, you know, Abrante. They're all these young people who are the new young Nigerians who are there doing things, doing the R&B. But most of them are not taking on African music as a fusion thing that they could use as a tool. You know, something they could even go further with. They are now have adopted other forms, R&B, whereas the other way around, people like Akon are also taking from Africa and trying to put it with their music to move forward. So yeah, it's interesting. Maybe you, sister, take a leaf from it. I think the best way forward is when you yourself do your own collaboration within yourself. Now that you live here, you know the systems here, you see how best you can collaborate the music that you understand and how people want to understand music from here. Quickly.
Yes.
To your one, it depends who's promoting the gig. You know, how are they selling it? Are they selling it to the African people? So sometimes things are going by us without even knowing because of the mediums of communication. If they've been putting the voice, for instance, where do African people gather and meet? Between you and me, there's lots of big African gigs that are happening in town. You go to a gig with groups that have come from Nigeria. Over the weekend, there's 5,000 people, you know, attending those gigs. But the host community, meaning people who live in this country, don't even know that this is going on. With gigs coming, groups coming from Zimbabwe for the weekend. They fly in, do a gig, back, 5,000 capacity filled up. Nobody else knows about it. So I think in terms of marketing, you know, it depends who's promoting it, where are they marketing it, who are they marketing it to. Yeah, so that's just a quick response to it. The other one, to my brother, Papa J there. Yes, we had an organization like that. I don't know whether you heard it. It was called PAMA, Pan-African Promoters and African Musicians Association. I was the vice chair of it. Teddy Jose was the chairman. Charles Isman was the secretary. We tried to do exactly what you were saying, but very few musicians came to support it, came to support the idea of trying to have this association of African musicians and African promoters to talk together to see how we can help our artists, to see how we can get them access to come into the country if they are having problems with work permits and so forth. That never took off the ground. Yeah?
Thank you.
These guys have an incredible, what do you call it, a constituency. People listen to them. The press will report their stuff quite happily, without sort of too much criticism. But all the time, there is value in music, there is value in recorded music. But who's got it? Google's got it. Google sells your music, but it doesn't pay you anything. Every time you see an ad and you go on a page because of some music and there's an ad there, are you earning from that? How does this impact directly on artists who work in this area that we've all agreed doesn't exist? Well, the first thing is that if you were a group or an artist who was earning a modicum of income in one currency, dollars, sterling, Deutschmarks, francs, and that was coming in every 6 months or whatever, and you were able to translate that to another currency, the buying power was enhanced. So in other words, it allowed a greater spread. You had an enhanced income. If you were earning in one country, spending in another, you had an enhanced income. Now, with the decimation of that income, then you don't. And that's impacted quite harshly on music from outside the northern world. I can see it in my own statements. It's just going down, and I know what they used to get, and I know how much that could be translated to. Now it can't be. If the often, when the people say, man, it's broke, get over it, just get over it, innovate or die, they'll often point to live work. Now, with the best within the world, live work ain't going to give you a solid living, not for a long time anyway. And if it does, it's only for a very few people. Now, this is actually the case for all artists. I mean, none of us are unique in this kind of thing. The problems that we face here are the same basic problems that everybody else. There's only a degrees of nuance. But in live work, there are particular issues with artists coming from outside the West. So if you're coming in, then you're coming from across the sea 3,000 miles away, it's expensive. It's very difficult to do a tour that will sustain you, that will allow you time to build up an audience in the host country. Very, very difficult. Some of the artists, some of the Western artists might be a wee bit jealous because they go, oh, they're getting some maybe Arts Council grant here and this and that, and look, they're getting a nice big sort of middle-class audience, because that's largely what you get. You don't get necessarily the youth. You get a sort of an older audience, going back to the point. If your music is from a different culture, then how does the host culture take it? It's tricky. So it's very difficult to build up the momentum in order to sustain a career in a new country. If you decide that you're going to live in the new country and you're going to interact with local musicians, then for better or for worse, you are likely to be described, and you want to retain the element of your music that is unique both to you and your origins, then you're, for sake of argument, let's say Botswana, you're a Botswana artist, and you're working with Irish musicians. So you go along and you can here build up some momentum. You can build up a following. You try going to Belgium. No, man, we're not going to take you. We've got our own Botswanan Irish act here. We've got our Belgian Ghanaian act here. We've got our Danish Gambian act. We don't want. So again, these are not that different from the problems that world music that doesn't exist artists face, but they have a certain twist to them. And my heart goes out. It must be very, very, very hard at times. And there we go. What can be done? Well, I think it's a moral question. And I think we have a responsibility to challenge this assumption that the system is broke. I think we have a responsibility to challenge the assumption that says there's no value in recorded music, it's something you give away free. I think we have a responsibility to challenge people like Google. They're saying, they're selling the advertising on the back of our music. With me, if you did a deal with me, it would be a deal that you would have to sign. Oh, no way, you've got to sign. But you've got to read it. You've got to look at it. You're an adult. You're intelligent. You read the deal. If you don't like it, you don't sign it. What deal did you ever sign with Google?
My passion is to bring women forward in the business, and I've worked with a lot of women in that respect. So to work with me, and it's the same thing really for getting yourself out in the marketplace, for being radio ready, for being career ready. You need to know what you're doing. You need to be good. You need to have a story. Have a story about what you're doing. Have a story in your music, and have your story ready. You really have to be ready. Whoever you are, whatever your field, whether you're a promoter, a label, in broadcasting, an artist. So that whoever is going to help you, promote you, put you out there doesn't have to do all the work for you. So you need your product, you need your demo first, and eventually your recording. I think I'm really looking forward to what Namvana has to say about this. I've really watched your trajectory. You need to have your photographs. You need to have your schedule. You need to be ready to go. It really, really is important, because there are a lot of people in the field. I think the ones that go through that are very visible, they're not necessarily the best. They're the ones that have got their own selves together. They're the ones that have their backing. They're the ones that consistently deliver and who grow, and so that when you go to their performance, there's that thrill, there's that moment you think, I was there, and that was special, and no one else was doing that, and you take that away in your heart, and then you've got to be ready for the next time and the next time, because we're talking about markets and promoting and getting some staying power for artists, and I think the situation now where it's had to become really, really, really even more DIY than it was, I think we are actually seeing situations where we are able to see certainly UK-based artists more often, and so you can see a development, because I think that's something that's been pretty awful in our business coming and going, is that we call it the train spotter element, where someone new comes and then someone else new, and that there isn't the development opportunity for the artist or the development opportunity for the audience gaining the ears and the language to listen to see an artist grow and develop. So there are so many different angles I could take this in, but one thing that, when I was, talking with Louisa, is the area of radio that I work in. I've had a long-running program on Resonance FM called African Essence. I've worked on a number of RSL's short-term radios and SOAS Radio, and way back, one of the first women's radio stations. I'm also on the board of Women's Radio Group.